The City of Port Richard Council work study session for June 17th. Call to order, and if you rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. The first item is a 15-minute item. I'd like to start by apologizing to the council. And also, if you'll look on the second page of your packet, you'll see insurance claims. The title of the second page is Insurance Claims and Procedures. And what happened here is, would you like me to read it to you, or have you all read it? What happened?
I think we've read it.
Background?
Not everyone here may have heard it. Go ahead and read it.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's not that long.
All right, the background. Early in the morning of June 4th, 2014, a Public Works employee was mowing the grass on Bethel at the corner of Hyperberry. The mower struck a guide wire, sending sparks to the top of the pole, causing a live wire to fall onto the ground. In addition, the spark was transmitted back to a nearby residence, creating an explosion in the breaker box, resulting in a fire in the home. There was another residence adjacent to and connected to that power panel that also incurred electrical damage. However, we did note on this report, we mentioned that caught fire. I don't believe it caught fire.
The second home?
The second home.
Correct.
It was just a failure of the electrical panel for them too. None of the employees or residents were injured. Unfortunately, this incident left 2 families displaced. But like I said, I apologize that I didn't get back to the council immediately as soon as I could. One of the reasons I didn't is it's a valid reason. The insurance company, we contacted the insurance company within 2 hours, and the insurance company is in Olympia, our carrier. And of course, it took them a while to mobilize and get here. They didn't get here until in the afternoon. And they asked that we wouldn't say anything public until they had a chance to investigate. They didn't want the city admitting guilt or anything, actually, before their investigation was complete. As it turned out, the investigation went on until Friday. In fact, it wasn't complete Friday evening when we went home. So. Like I said, no one was injured we thought at the time, but since then, Monday, we received a statement saying that somebody was injured that was living or was staying overnight with one of the renters and hurt their arm trying to put the fire out. So once again, we haven't fully vetted that with our insurance company. So if we need to talk about that anymore, we probably should do that in executive session because that's still pending potential litigation. So I guess where I'm at with this is as soon as humanly possible and our insurance company concurs, I will try to get an email to each one of you if and when this ever happens again. This is the first time a situation like this has happened since I've been mayor, and I hope it's the last time that it's happened. But we're still working our way through with our insurance company what's going to happen with these folks. We are trying to make them whole as fast as possible, but it's going to take some time, 4 to 8 weeks probably. So, is there any questions?
Well, I heard about it, a newspaper article, and I didn't appreciate hearing about a situation that is as closely connected as it is to us from the press.
I understand.
It was a week later, and I'm sure that whether the insurance company was investigating it or not, that is something that we could have talked about and had a little more knowledge of. So I felt like it was less than transparent. That's what I'm saying.
Well, if I can interject. So a couple things. One is, at what point do you notify? Because we have things that happen every day.
Sure.
Our emergency management, put on by Kitsap County Emergency Management, specifically teaches us to not include elected officials in things. Other than your PIO, Public Information Officer. I mean, that's what we're told to do for a number of reasons. And so there are things that happen every day. So my confusion would be, at what level do I discern, this needs to be some sort of public comment versus this is just routine day to day. So I think that's my input to the discussion is, like when there was a plug in the sewer line on Sunday, does that rise to the need to send out some sort of public notice? I mean, again, there are things that happen in public works every day that, like on a water system, you only have to do a notice to boil water or something under like certain extreme conditions. Otherwise, if you have, like we have the situation on the house that had a singular apartment that had a water issue, that after we investigated it and took samples, we determined it was just isolated to the apartment. If we had sent out all this information, hey, there's this, potential water quality issue, it gets out ahead of what we're trying to do. So I guess my issue is, I don't know when we would notify versus not notify.
Well, I was part of the notification. This situation was out of the ordinary in a lot of ways. Mark and Jay Cookson were away.
Right.
And so the way this got even notified to the mayor was one of the employees came in to let us know that the one employee on the tractor was involved in an incident to notify HR that there had been an incident. So I'd asked, and I overheard that. So I said, does anybody let anybody know about this? And the answer was no. And I said to HR, we better get a hold of Rihanna and get a hold of the mayor. And somebody better call the mayor at home and get him down here. And I think that's probably about the words I used. So it was a situation that no one had ever really expected to be in. And so, yeah, the protocols weren't exactly clear. And even the mayor's notification was somewhat happenstance.
Well, accidents happen. I had no problem with the accident itself. I mean, it's finding out a week later through a newspaper article that bothers me. Because if someone had asked me, I would say, heck no, we don't have anything going on here. And so.
Well, that's why I was worried about the mayor knowing about
it. Yeah, I would be worried about the mayor knowing about it also.
Right.
But, I'm just saying, that didn't sit very well with me. I mean, I'm hearing all this, I'm understanding that we have to wait for insurance and all of that. But I would like a different system in place so that we have a better idea of what's going on when something like this happens.
Well, the system that I plan on instigating is that before I talk to any newspaper, that the council will be sent out a press release.
We don't need a press release. I think just a
An
heads up
email.
that something happened.
Okay,
I don't need to know
alright,
the
well.
details because I was concerned that the Kitsap Sun article that we read about last Tuesday night when we got home had a quote from you. And I thought, well, obviously you spoke to them. At that time, it would have been nice if you said the details are still being worked out. This is what happened. I'm a little concerned that our insurer is saying that we don't want to tell the public. Well, I mean, our insurer is allowed to have a gag order. I can understand from a business sense that would make sense while details are being unfolding, but I'm really concerned, Mark, that you said that the Kitsap Emergency Management System says not to inform elected officials.
That's in our training for, if we open the EOC, we're
Well, who are
told,
you informing then?
we're told to keep elected officials out of the EOC.
Well, yeah, we're not in the office, but aren't we kept abreast of what's happening?
I guess I've taken the training a little bit differently than you, Mark. There is a role for elected officials in an emergency, not in the
Not in the
EOC.
EOC.
Right.
That's where the professionals do their job.
Yes.
But to not tell the elected officials is something that I've never heard.
Well, no, it's-
And the elected officials have their role. Lessons learned. I'm not necessarily going to shoot at this one, but the one thing that I guess I've always looked at it is really the city. The city operation to me is a three-legged stool. It takes the council, it takes the mayor, and it takes the staff to operate it. And we're all three in this together. And when you leave one of them out, it's no different than we doing something with your staff and not telling you about it, Mayor. We all three need to be included into the discussion. Now, with the insurance company comments, we talk about stuff frequently in executive session that is confidential. We all know how to keep our mouths shut. But I don't think that the insurance company's intent, I would be surprised if it was, don't tell the electeds.
They didn't say don't tell the electeds, they said just don't make any public comments until
Well,
you get a chance to investigate.
Public is actually the fourth leg of the stool.
The thing that I started thinking about that was that we actually had an executive session that one night, and this obviously was something that where litigation could be involved, and therefore it easily qualifies for another agenda item in our executive session. And yet we still went home that night and not knowing. So all of those things say, you know, that let's get a better system going so that the council's apprised of what's going on in a delicate way. And I'm not trying to say, you know, put it up on the reader board. I'm just saying, let us know. I think that's what we're all saying.
Okay. Discussion item number 2. Mr. Chang, would you lead us in this discussion?
Well, actually, Brandy and I decided this should be on the agenda because Visit Kitsap, which is Patty Graf Hoke and Diane Robinson, had an idea about how they wanted to be funded, or for funding moving forward, and I thought the council should hear their ideas.
Come on up. You want to
You know,
sit down? Or you gotta
Diane
stand
and
up?
I just gonna pull up a couple of chairs here so we can get it all. I do have, packets. I do have some packets for any, actually have your names on them. So, you, I do, sir.
Right.
Jerry.
Well, she's passing those out. I'm Diane Robinson. I've been on the board of directors for pretty close to 10 years of the VCB. And for 20 years, I'm one of the owners. I'm one of the owners of Elandon Gardens in Gorst. And so I see Port Orchard as a very important entity in our business. Whatever is happening in Port Orchard, I want to be part of it, and vice versa. And so,
I apologize.
it's okay.
Oh, I'm training a new employee.
There you go.
I'm training a new employee. We have our employee that we've had. She's got a great job in the Austin, Texas, at running her own property, and so I'm training somebody. Yeah, Nicole. Yeah, she got a job. She had a chance to manage her own property in Austin. So I'm in the middle of changing. I want to thank Fred for this invitation to come here and have a conversation. What the conversation is about, and we're having this conversation with all the municipalities. I've had a 1-hour meeting with Mayor Lent, and we're treating them on an individual basis, but what we've decided was that for 2015, the paradigm that we have been using for funding Visit Kitsap or regional tourism marketing really hasn't been working. It hasn't been working for a long time. And we've decided that we'd all like to have a social life where people can actually get together and have fun. And so we're going to try and shift this paradigm, and we're here tonight to make a proposal to you for consideration. And in what I provided is a 1-page letter, which for me, as you all know, is unique. But I did provide some information in your packets, brief information that does talk about the benefits of economic development and tourism. What we're proposing is that rather than Visit Kitsap continue to apply for lodging tax funding as a separate entity and compete with the people that we are really supposed to be partnering with and helping, is that we believe it's time that regional tourism marketing were treated as other economic development entities and funded accordingly. In your packets, there's a Dean Runyon report, and tourism-related industries in Kitsap County have grown $100 million in the last 10 years. It's now worth $352 million. We generate over $25 million a year just in lodging, and $258 million in food service and drinking, which we know is not all visitors. But, and I just got a report here, a STAR report, which I'm not going to share with you because it's really complicated, the Smith report that I get. And our lodging for Kitsap County, we are out of 39 counties, we're number 5 as far as increase in the occupancy rate. We're at 5%, which is the same as the state. Other folks that have been advertising, like Grays Harbor and Snohomish County, are up a little. So I guess what we're saying is that we really believe that it's time to recognize that regional tourism marketing is part of the economic. Those are, I put those on there on purpose because they're eye candy, but go ahead and rip it off.
I'm sorry.
No, don't go do it. It's.
We're trying to do it quietly.
You don't
Oh, I gave it one. I just gave it to you.
I did one.
Oh,
No, it's
I
Jess.
saw her name on one, I don't know
Oh,
where.
I did.
It's Jess. I passed it over to him.
Oh,
There we go.
Oh,
Okay. We didn't.
Here's Cindy's over here.
the city attorney, the city attorney stole
We
it.
didn't know you were coming.
I'm sorry. I
We get confused
apologize.
a lot.
I should have checked with Fred. But we really believe that it's just time that we started engaging with the councils. Right now, the majority of what I have to do to apply for lodging tax for all the municipalities and even Kitsap County is I am dealing with making a very high-level strategic presentation to people that's not what their expertise is. And I only get to do it once a year, and I usually get 10 minutes. As opposed to sitting down with a executive committee or a economic development committee of the city and saying, how can we partner with you? How can we interface? And complement what it is that you're doing. So we just believe that there's a lot of exciting things happening right now in Kitsap Peninsula and we feel that it's time to have a more interactive partnership with the leadership of the cities. The reason that we've decided to bring this up at this time is that we are still in the process of getting our designation for the National Park Service. And last year, the situation that occurred with both Port Orchard but particularly Bremerton, where we were suddenly defunded at the 11th hour, that caught the attention of the National Park Service, and we almost lost our grant application for our water trails designation management. That was through the National Park Service, and potentially our designation for the water trails, because they just don't like that kind of press. So we had to have a meeting with the Board of County Commissioners and reassure the National Park Service, no, we're definitely on board with this, we're gonna do it, we're moving forward. So, and then I was recently appointed to the Governor's Task Force, Blue Ribbon Task Force on Parks and Outdoor Recreation, and we are the only VCB in Washington State that is named to that 16-member task force, and we're working to find funding for the parks. So I'm working with Senator Parlett, I'm working with a lot of elected officials. So it's really critical for us to maintain our reputation within the outside folks that we're working with on these kind of larger regional partnerships. And everybody believes that Kitsap County is in a leadership role in their ability to merge environment, outdoor recreation, and economic development. We're seen as Exhibit A for how it's done. So I think it's really important that we do everything we can to protect that reputation and foster it. So we wanted to avoid having, you know, if there were any opportunity to avoid, every opportunity to avoid any potential press that may not promote that positive image that we have on the outside. So the couple options that we're all suggesting includes a model that is similar to the one for the City of Gig Harbor, and we have just a professional services contract with the City of Gig Harbor. We don't apply for lodging tax, they just hire us and contract. They, as a city, I believe it's the mayor, I'm not sure, they just called us and said, you know, we're gonna give you a professional services contract. And that's what we have with them. It's one page. So, and then the other option is maybe a hybrid of the way that KEDA is funded, where it's a combination of maybe lodging tax or general funds. We would leave that up to the discretion of each individual city to determine that. But we just feel that it's time to shift this paradigm and look at a new way of funding regional tourism marketing for Kitsap County. If you have any, if there's any, I can answer any questions.
I think we all agree that tourism is important for the county, especially where it's a God-given, wonderful place we live in. So obviously it's attractive to people who come to the area. And I think that as a council, we'll have to decide. I mean, when you talk about funding, you're going to have to talk about amounts. And then when we get into amounts, that's when we have to get into, you know, where they come from.
And we're willing to, I mean, one of the suggestions is that we met with Mayor Lemp for about an hour and presented the same idea. We have different challenges in every city. We're reaching out to all of the leadership and saying that we're open to, but we just think that going and trying to compete with the people that we're supposed to serve and say that what we're doing is better than they're doing. What we do is much, much different. We do not want to compete with Sharon King. And I don't want to compete with the other businesses, the nonprofits that we're supposed to be serving, but the VCB does provide an extraordinary service in that we also include every park, you know, every Veterans Memorial, those kinds of things, and those are not paid members. Those people don't pay us. But the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is on our website. And those, we are there to serve the best interest of the travelers. So I'd like to let Diane say a couple words, because she's been at a lot of these lodging tax meetings.
I have indeed. And as a small business, and we have a pretty active website, I spend about $10,000, just an average, in just independent marketing. I get calls all the time. Where am I going to stay? What else is there to do? So, you know, believe it or not, a garden is a pretty good attraction to the community. And, but they're not going to come an hour out of Seattle unless there's more to do and more to see. And, you know, as I sit in the meetings of the committees, and I'm looking at all the people at the table, and they're all about them. You know, I don't come to the table about me. I come to the table about the region. I want people to come to Kitsap County. I don't want them to come to just one thing. And in my case, you know, I'm just giving you an example of a business, one small business that's important to tourism in our community. It's important that we all work together and that we send people out to the restaurants and to the places and, oh, be sure to see this, instead of, well, I don't care if anybody wants to see. You know, they came to see me. It's like, okay, so, and in a really small way, that's what we're dealing with all of the people who are coming to the table to apply for money. And it's important that we have regional tourism marketing. It's important to me. You know, my little $10,000 isn't nearly as important as the telephone call that comes from a writer in Chicago or Michigan, and they call the VCB. They don't call the chamber, and they're not going to call you. They call the Visitor Convention Bureau, and up comes an article. And you know, Patty's job is just to lay it out. Here we are, and these are great places, and oh, you better come here too. And so it's really that $20,000 article is so important to our community, so much more than, I don't know. Every once in a while, I've had 3 conventions, bonsai conventions at Elandon Gardens, and responsible for probably 200 rooms over the past 20 years. Nothing I do is as important as the regional effort that we put, and we're out there consistently. So,
And that's in partnership. We really like to stress to people is, it's just like KEDA. They're doing aerospace and they're doing manufacturing and we're doing tourism, and then you have some excellent groups here, whether it's Chimes of Lights, whether it's the Fathoms of Fun folks that do the concerts, or the farmers markets. Those are all really important to us because we're bringing visitors here and they need to have things to do. So we're just asking you to recognize that, like you do funding with KEDA, you're not expecting that KEDA is necessarily going to be responsible for every single part of your economic development. They're a contributing factor, and we would just like to have the recognition that the tourism efforts that we're putting forth, and that you're contributing to that effort. That's all. For the regional, it's a separate sales channel. It's driver buses,
Well,
as
Patty,
opposed to so.
Let us go
that's
back
what
to what we were talking about, because if we embrace what you're saying, and I think there's probably, you're making a case, and it's reasonable. However, we still have the issues, how we're gonna fund certain things. For example, Visit Kitsap, and the issue of whether it's gonna come out of the general fund or the lodging tax. Now, we've tried to have it come out of lodging tax, basically. And, the procedures we use right now,
Right.
you need to show up and do your thing. However, I hear what you're saying, and I know that Kitsap County funds the Admiral Theater.
Well, Kitsap County doesn't.
Well, let me
They
finish
stopped
here.
doing that. Oh, sorry.
They fund the Admiral Theater and other organizations, and they do it automatically. So I don't know what the rules are, Fred, actually, for doing what they want to do, which is kind of stay out of the fray and just have a number and have a set a number, and of course that would be up to us, and based on what you request, and then based on what we think. But can we do something like that?
Well,
Just like everybody else. And so
It's
maybe
been
we
done.
can visit that idea.
it's been done, and you could look at the Gig Harbor model. And it's also an opportunity for you to step out as a leader.
You guys would be the leader. You would be leading the charge. Also, I just want to let you know, I talked to Christine Stansberry, and we are in communication with the coalition about this idea. We shared the idea. They know that we're here tonight, and we're working closely with them. We want it absolutely understood that we are not here trying to come in over outside of the lodging tax. In fact, if there were lodging tax dollars, it would be required that probably Mayor Mathis actually would, the way that the law is that the city would then apply for the funds, and then you would just decide. We don't automatically get the money. If the money is for regional tourism marketing for the city, and then that's what Gig Harbor does, and then they contract with, it's just that it's, you would be picking and making a decision that we need to be contribute to the regional tourism marketing, and then that would allow us to work in partnership with all of the other folks in your area, and I think we have a lot of expertise to offer and share, and if we could do that in an open and positive environment, I hate to think what we could accomplish. So,
Betty, I think it's a good concept. I think it's a good idea. If I'm with Jerry, you know, we've got to sit down and figure out how we can put these pieces of the puzzle together and make them work. I would be interested if you wouldn't mind sharing your contract with Gig Harbor, since
sure.
I hate to create something new if we can steal from someone
I
else.
actually have given it to Brandy to look at.
That'd be great. That gives us something to look at.
And also shared with the RCW, because you would have to, as a city, and in fact, all the cities, Gig Harbor, that's how they do it, and then they, they have a really unique paradigm, or not paradigm, but a model that they've grandfathered in, but they actually have the lodging tax committee that they have formed actually is the marketing and development committee. So, and they do not solicit, they do not give a dime of the money to any nonprofits. They use it 100% all for marketing Gig Harbor. So they don't use it, she was aghast when I told her that we were spending it on things like the
Well, that's what
Admiral
Port Townsend
Theater.
does, very same thing.
Yeah, and so she said, so when they have lodging, and she said, our hoteliers would never allow that to happen. And so I don't know that you'd be able to, and I talked to Patty Lent about this as well, I don't know that you'd be able to enter into something like that immediately, but if we were to take a step towards that, and.
Why couldn't we?
Well, it's up to you.
I mean, I don't see any reason. There's only one VCB in the county.
Yeah.
There's a sole source. That's why I would be interested in seeing a document of how they structured that.
And I could give Brandy actually the name of the woman. Her name's Karen Scott, and she was very, very, helpful in that. And we've also approached this. I had a conversation with Mayor Blair about shifting paradigms. They're at a conference this week. But I mean, I really, really do think it's time. This is just a little small thing. It's small. I'm going to wave it. This is a really fabulous, fabulous thing. It's copyrighted Visit Kitsap, and it's a partnership between Washington Bikes, and it is potentially a statewide campaign that would be used. This is a little facsimile, but would be used for the biking community. And it's really originally designed as a farm-to-bike program that I'm working with Commissioner Garrido and permitting as far as signage, that farms would be able to hang this out. It's got this, I can pass it around to you, it's really cute. But it has where farms can color in the little things of the amenities they have, and bicyclists that are biking along the road, if they saw this, would know that that farm is open and what amenities it has. But we've had so much positive press about this, I mean, with the our survey groups, that the small businesses want to use it, and also farmers markets. So anyway, you can look, well, I'll leave it with you.
I think they're more interested in structure at this point.
I know you're interested in structure, but my point is that you would be taking a leadership in doing something different, just like Kitsap is taking a leadership in our tourism development. Nobody else in the state is doing this. So what we're doing here as far as regional tourism development is innovative, and so we're asking the council to consider maybe having some innovative ideas with regard to funding.
Well, as the council has heard me say many times, I absolutely hate the hotel tax.
I know you do.
Mainly because of this competition that occurs every year, and so much
It's terrible.
unhappiness over so little money. And you look at the scheme of things. So if there's a way that we can come to an agreement and take one of those out of the battle, I think worthwhile.
Well, I want to have a social life. I want to be able to go places
Well, I'd like
without
one
people
too.
being mad at me
And
because
a
I'm
VCB
applying for
person.
funding.
Don't sign up for an elected position then.
I don't have any. So anyway, I want to thank you so much for your time, and we're happy to come back. We're happy to work with the committee and provide more information if that would be useful. And
Are you changing the relationship with Kitsap County? Or are you going for the same funding with Kitsap County?
well, they gave us a 2-year.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons we decided to take this step.
You're in the
now.
middle of the 2 years with Kitsap County.
Right, we have a second year that they've committed to, so this, we felt that even though it's not a huge amount of money, it's one staff person, but there's a lot more marketing we could be doing. We at least have a little bit of stability with that regard, so we thought this would be the opportunity to go ahead and try and see if we can't at least shift the paradigm with our municipalities.
Well, they're an important entity because they provide, over 80% of the revenues, I imagine, in the
Absolutely.
county.
Mhm.
Now, last year, you actually gave us a dollar amount.
I did 12.
Are you,
Every year
is
we
that what
did
you're
that. talking
talking about this year too?
You know, we start high and come down, so we'll start
So
at
we're down
20
to
and
12?
then you can give us 12.
Okay, I'm just curious what the ask would have
Which
been.
is not too much over what I pay for one business.
No, that's true.
I think that we would entertain, be happy to have a discussion about the funding. I mean, I think there was some discussion that maybe some of it, I've talked with Christine, ideas about doing a match or something that we could do. And we're absolutely open to having a discussion on any level with committees.
Well, maybe we'll put that on a work study and talk about it.
I like the concept. I think we're talking about two different things, though, because when we're talking about the contract you have with Gig Harbor, that's for them hiring you for their website.
No, what it is that
Okay.
what we did was, I apologize. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what it was is that we hadn't had a relationship with them for 2 years. There was a previous person there who just did not want to partner with us, and that person left, and the city council, called, we got a call from the city of Gig Harbor and said the city council wants to know why we're not on your website and why we're not in your e-newsletters and everything. So we went down there to make a presentation, and it lasted 10 minutes, and what we agreed to was for the first year to get started, to see how things went, that we would start with they gave us $5,000 just to be on the website. And then, so that they could have some recognition, and then if there were travel writers or something, then they would be included, but we don't include them in any advertising as far as paid advertising and things like
Those
that.
are separate projects that they.
Yeah, and they also are not on our water trails, and they want to be on the water trails, and they said, we want to pay, we'll pay whatever it takes. They really want to be on that water trails map. And so does Mason County. We're meeting with the Mason County Parks and Recreation people. We got a call from them. We got a call from their Hood Canal Tourism Group. So we're talking about expanding the water trails map to double the size, and they really want to be part of that. So there's a lot of regional synergies as well that I think would benefit the city of Port Orchard through this a larger, more regional economic development style partnership. Instead of just having us, work through LTAC and then not have any participation in what in some of the other regional marketing programs that you might like to invest in or participate in. So,
Well, thank you.
thank you so much for your time. This is breakthrough right here. I would never have a meeting like this at a study session with the city council.
That they
Never.
didn't say that how much.
You know,
Well,
I
now
mean,
you
we
can
didn't,
party.
so
You can go party now.
we can
That's
party.
pretty easy.
Now you
No,
can
but
have a social
I
life.
think the fact that you took this first step is really a breakthrough, and I can't thank you enough for this opportunity.
Go out to dinner.
We were at Amy's, we had the pokey, we did the whole deal.
We did.
Yeah, we did everything, so.
Thank
Anyway, thank you so much, and next time I promise you'll have a packet. Here, Brandon.
Okay, we'll move on to number 3. Mr. Martin, can you tell us about the budget calendar?
I can. I can start out by handing it out to you all, and it'll be passed down the table. And within the next few days, the budget calendar as presented here will be posted on the website so that the public can see and follow along. Each year, about this time, the treasurer comes forward and provides the, hello?
Something isn't working, we can barely hear you.
That's that. Can you hear me now? Each year you see a document very similar to this. This is the update for the 2014 budget calendar. Some of the column on the left is due to procedures and historical practices of the city of Port Orchard. On the right, there's a column, and those are statutory deadlines that the city must meet in its budget preparation. At the most recent Council Finance Committee, the Council Committee met, and we did go over the calendar. One of the things that we talked about there is this November 11th, this year will be Veterans Day, and so if you don't have a meeting that day, I have combined on Tuesday, November 25th, both the first and final reading of the ordinance setting the 2015 property tax levy, and of course we will, previous to that time, have had a revenue hearing on that. And then also the public hearing and first reading of the 2015 budget ordinance. Now you can do both of those things on the same night. I did call and confirm that, as long as there is no controversy on the first and final reading of the ordinance setting the 2015 property tax. Should there be a controversy with that and that not move forward, then of course we couldn't go and move on to the public hearing on the budget ordinance itself. So this calendar is written to compensate for not having a meeting, if you so choose, on November 11th. I might mention that the budgeting module on Springbrook is in place. That was something that was started under Mr. Mayor Capola's administration to provide a budgeting module so that directors would have real-time budget information in the management of their departments. And the Finance Committee and I talked about how we're ready to put that in place. You'll see a slightly different formatted document. I'm not really sure how severe that might be. I don't think it will be. But what the committee talked about was to go ahead, and what we'll do is we'll write the budget and format it as close as we can to the traditional format that you're used to. And then if in fact it comes out and there's information that council people look for that they say we're missing this and we would like to have it, then we'll come back and add that documentation back into the book rather than just trying to replicate a document that has been brought about over years of work. So we'll work real hard at that. It'll be extra work this year for the department heads to use the Springbrook module, but I'm convinced that going forward we'll have much better data. It will become easier once we get it all set up for them to do their budgets, so I'm really excited about that. So that's where we're at. We're kicking it off. We're already working behind the scenes on the budget, looking at revenue numbers and those sorts of things. And it's hard to believe it's time to write a budget, but it is. So, not to bore you any longer with budget information, I will lay down the microphone and answer any questions.
You may recall that last year, additional members of the council attended the all-day meeting with department heads. I guess that would be the one scheduled for October 31st.
It is, and you know, I'd caution everybody that a lot of these meeting dates are tentative, based upon the availability of the council members, and then to a lesser degree the department heads. But that is the all-day meeting.
I think we found it really helpful, and I know some of us would like a meeting like that to be open to the entire council if they can attend. I found it very useful. I think Beck did as well, just to hear the budgets, the department heads speak specifically to what they wanted. I don't know, do you committee members recommend something else or another meeting as being more informative, or? I think we checked the same ones almost.
The only thing that I would say is that the only way we can do it, as we've learned, is a special council meeting. So, I mean, it's something that certainly is possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a notice issue.
You know, frankly, I think we're getting to a point where we're basically gonna start having just one big committee.
Yeah.
It's a council
Committee as a
committee.
whole.
You know, why have a finance, why have a public property or utilities or anything? We'll just, council just meet on those issues at some point.
Well, I'm not going
Because-
that far, but I'm
I
saying
know,
some
but
of these
but that's where
meetings
we're
would be
going, when you
helpful
start
for more
adding
of
in 2 or
us.
3 council people and a committee meeting and calling a special meeting. Why? Why not just move into a system where the full council meets on these issues, and
Maybe we should just
which is kind of a
schedule that.
return to the future, really, where it used to be.
We could just take a study session, say, we'll do it at night, and all the department heads come to a study session, and that whole study session is devoted to that.
That would be fine with me. I would enjoy, 1 hour of work study day-to-day finance. There's a lot of information that I just don't get. And I think the added exposure might make it easier for me to understand all the demands that, other people have different perceptions. They're like, oh, we should raise this tax. And I'm not here yet. I think maybe additional discussion or background, I might be closer.
I would have a concern that we're starting to open the doors and have a, I'm sorry. Public property and economic development's already 3-4 hours a Monday, There's no way we could put those issues
That's the downside.
on a work
Yeah.
study session. And
Finance.
then you add utilities and you add finance, and pretty soon we're meeting every night for 2 hours to get through all the issues. I think that's what the purpose of the subcommittees are to do, or to vet those issues for the full council, to bring those forward. And I also understand, Fred, that you want to know more and you want to be involved, but at some point in time, I don't know. I'm not in favor of adding
Well, what if we
more
had it?
to our agenda, because, if we do it with finance, then we're gonna do it public property, where does it stop? And pretty soon,
I concur with that, but what if we had it right, not in that back room, but out here and put it on video for the other council members to look at? I mean, just a thought,
Maybe that would work.
maybe.
I mean, the concern in doing it at a study session is not doing each department head justice. I mean, it takes all day, as you learned, Fred, to go through each of the departments and give them an opportunity to talk about their budget. We're trying to cram that into 2 hours or 3 hours in the study session. Obviously, we want the abbreviated version, which may not necessarily bring out all the issues and/or give them a fair opportunity to.
And quite a bit of that is Councilman Clausen knows, a lot of the issues that are on that day have already been vetted to some degree. And a lot of the budget issues have been worked through, and it's kind of a culmination of the process at that point to really get down and say, what are the possibilities? So that's a pretty intense meeting, as you know. That's really,
I certainly appreciate what the finance committee does. I see 20 meetings here. I'm only asking that one be attended
well, I'm
by the
all
full
for
council.
transparency.
Not all
Fred.
20.
No, Fred, you
I'm
can go
not
to
asking
every one.
for
I wouldn't care.
Public property, there are issues that we do escalate to the entire council
Uh,
because we don't have the.
Absolutely, and we've solved the issue of having that be brought forward by having it in this room and videotaped. And I think that's probably a pretty good recommendation and a compromise for that, at least that all-day finance, to just videotape it. Anybody's interested in hearing what the department heads are requesting or why their reasoning is behind that request can go to the video and view it. I just, we went through all that special notice and meeting issue, and I have that concern.
Well, please, I'll go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, before I was on the council, I actually sat in on a finance, that particular budget planning meeting. And I think that single meeting was probably the most meaningful meeting I have ever sat in to get an idea of the needs of the city and the way it was presented with Public Works and the different ones coming forward. It really did expand my horizons, and I loved it. And I have to say, I agree that we have committees for a reason, but that particular meeting was extremely helpful. And so I'm with you, Fred, on that one.
Well, if there's any, I'm pledged to be as open and transparent. So if there's anything I can do outside of the committee structure on information as you hear about things, please, call me anytime or drop by or send me a note, however you contact me, and I'll get whatever information I can to you as soon as I'm possibly able to do that.
And this was going to be a possible retreat topic, but I was going to ask that every committee make their agenda and minutes and handouts available to the other council members, if not also the public. Sometimes in minutes we'll read about, there's a certain report and we don't see it, but is there any way, after your meeting that you can just say, this is with the minutes, here are the handouts from the meeting, in case you wanted to review them?
Brandy, there is a PDF packet, like of the finance committee. You're talking about the finance committee itself?
Yeah, but also every council committee could certainly do that. Public property, we get a packet. We could share it with the rest of the council if they're interested after that meeting.
Is that PDF packet of the finance committee, is that online or is that just on our common drive?
It's just on our common drive. I think what we post on our website is just the agenda, and that may be before or after the meeting, but yeah. If the council wishes to have all of the committee agenda packets published in the same way that our work study and regular council meetings are published, we can do that. It's just going to take a little time. I mean, you'd have to talk with, I think, Mark's staff and Nick's staff to make sure that they get it on the website. I don't know that I have, in finance department, I can help the finance department, but
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's just it's a council preference.
Our packets I PDF everything at the end of the packet and save it all off in that. So Fred, at least for finance, that packet's there, and I'll work with Brandy and see if we can put it someplace that you could retrieve it.
Or we could just request it after every meeting if we have to do something formal like that.
Well, however you'd like, you tell me what you want, and I'll, under the guidance of the finance committee, I'll do whatever I can.
This may be a bigger discussion for all the committees, but I appreciate getting the agendas emailed by Janine with the packets, and I'd also like the minutes emailed. I personally like them both hard copy and email, so I can find them easier, and I don't see why the whole packets committees are not included.
You're right, I think it's a bigger subject.
Yeah, I didn't intend to discuss it.
Is electronic
Yeah.
all right with you? Electronic, and then we have to print out something. Okay, any other budget calendar questions? Thank you. Darn it, thank you. Okay. Sidewalk repair, maintenance responsibility.
Good evening. So, over the years, the city obviously tracks and responds to public works complaints. We've been doing it for years. When I came here in 2008, we kind of created a more formalized response. Identify the response, track it, show that there was follow-up response. And there's always been kind of a topic that we've struggled with from a staff level, from the person taking the phone call, how we respond. And that issue has always had to do with sidewalks and, responsibility of shrubs and trees and sidewalks and things in the city. And so my staff, actually, one of my staff members actually was concerned enough about it because she was just confused as to what information does she give. The issue is that if you look at the state RCW 3570, if you look at the Port Orchard Municipal Code 12.12, you look at Seattle Department of Transportation, you know, some of the literature I put in here, it's very clear that the maintenance responsibility is to the adjoining property owner. Even in our own code, for example, if there was a tree that was uplifting a sidewalk, the city's code basically says that code enforcement should send a letter, give them X number of days to correct the situation. If they don't, the city will fix it and then lien the property. I mean, that's basically what our code says. That's what the state RCW says. That's what most jurisdictions do. But the city's never done that. You know, I went back and looked at, you know, a lot of public works directors before me. The city's always taken, I believe, the more conservative, you know, ensure response, which is if there's an issue and it's brought to our attention, which is a conversation that we've had a number of times on issues with AWC. You know, once we know that there's a trip hazard and it's on paper, or a site distance issue and it's on paper, if we don't respond to that and then there's an incident, the city puts themselves in a really bad position for not responding to that issue. And so in the past, when we've had a site distance issue, tree limbs, a sidewalk, somebody tripped and they fell, we get out right away and we fix it. And I think the city's always done that. But if we looked at the letter of the RCW and our own code, we really shouldn't be doing that. We should be going through a process of sending a letter of notification, giving a certain amount of time for it to be fixed, and if it doesn't, then it gets repaired and we lien them for it. So I guess, you know, what I'm looking for is simply, you know, direction. Should I start having code enforcement, you know, be involved in this process and we just follow our code, follow the state RCW, or should we continue to be more proactive and just take care of it kind of from an insurance responsibility standpoint?
So my initial thought when I read through this was on the liability end of it. Is it really going to hurt our overall risk if we wait 2 or 3 weeks to notice the property owner that they need to fix it? I mean, the tree didn't just pop into the sidewalk overnight. It doesn't need to be that error obviously been there, as well as most of those cracks and stuff like that. So it's another 2 or 3 weeks of risk if that's what we want to do by noticing the property owner that they need to fix it.
Yeah, I don't think there was...
Or work with them where the city would fix it and bring it back to the property.
Well, I think Greg could weigh in more, but I think the issue is we can do that, and I think as long as we're diligently pursuing a repair, maybe we're okay.
It sort of depends on the nature of the repair. I mean, how bad, what's wrong with the sidewalk? And if it's something that is of immediate concern, then you close off the sidewalk. You put up some cones and some ribbon and close it off. In just a little section, while you put the homeowner on notice, et cetera. If it's a crack that you know is going to need repair over the next couple of months, but it's not a major problem, then what you're suggesting is, sure, we got plenty of time to put the owner on notice. So there's a little bit of best professional judgment that Mark will have to, and his staff will have to exercise, but both situations are doable.
My feeling is, my initial feeling, because we can change our minds, right? Is if the homeowner's done something to impact the sidewalk, then I agree, they should be on the hook to do something about it. But if it's just general wear and tear on the sidewalk, like you might have general wear and tear on the street that's out front of their house too, where they haven't impacted it any more than, you know, whoever else has been walking up and down that sidewalk. I don't think I'm in favor of sticking it to the homeowner.
Well, it doesn't mean the city can't, as a policy, decide they're going to set aside money to repair sidewalks. It's in the city right away.
But if I build a new home, I pour the sidewalk.
Not necessarily. I mean, usually like a large commercial development, like the new one at Cedric, the new apartments. They're doing all those curb gutter sidewalks, all the landscaping. It's in the right of way. When they're done, we'll capitalize all that offsite work as the cities. If you just go build a house in a lot in the city, and you got an existing sidewalk there,
No, I'm talking about a development.
yeah, on a development, you'll build it and you'll turn it over to the city.
Right, but then you're turning it over to the city.
But to answer Jerry's question, no, if there was a tree that was planted on Kitsap Street 20 years ago and it never had an issue.
Is it a
and
big maple?
it could be a thundercloud, but if it suddenly,
It's right over here.
Is
Yeah.
it right over there?
if it suddenly starts to lift up the sidewalk and you didn't plan it, it's your responsibility
I
to
told
aid
it
it.
Well, wait, if you didn't plan it,
Right.
it's not your responsibility. That's not true.
Well, in reading through the SDOT documents, they don't distinguish between.
So there's an important distinction to be made. We're talking about two different things, but if we're now going into the abutting property owner's liability, the courts have been very clear in the last 20 years that the abutting owner has liability if they are a cause, either the sole cause or a joint cause of whatever the defect is. And a perfect example is they improved their property by planting trees in their front yard and the roots have pushed up the sidewalk. They are in that case, definitely. But if the city 20 years ago beautified the street and put street trees in, and now those are causing the sidewalk to come up, that is not the property owner's responsibility.
Sounds reasonable.
The other thing that I read in here, and I'm not sure which one of these, the way I read it was if a developer puts in a sidewalk, it's part of that homeowner, when they buy that house, inherits that sidewalk. It doesn't go to the city.
Well, you gotta remember, anything in the
But
right
as
of
far
way,
as responsibility for repair.
well, you own, when you buy a piece of property, you have a fee ownership, underlying ownership to the center of the street.
Right.
You've just provided a right of way. But I guess, Greg, I'm looking through this SDOT Title 15, they don't say anything in this thing
I'm
about
not
that.
really.
It's on state law.
Yeah, honestly, I knew this was on the topic. I spent some time reading the case law, and I don't know what Seattle does, but
Yeah.
you've got to prove. And our code actually has a section about property owner liability, which is out of date, because the cases, again, have said a city can't just, as a matter of law, write an ordinance that says, by the way, property owner, if there's any defect in the sidewalk in front of your house, you're liable. It has to be that the property owner is in some way the cause of that defect. And then absolutely, they're on the hook just like everybody else.
So what you were saying about letting their shrubs or trees or any of that stuff, that they're responsible, I absolutely think they should maintain that. And I'm walking on a hole, basically meaning the property repair a sidewalk, that if there's no trees or nothing they've done, that's pretty harsh to me.
It does sound harsh to me.
Well, this whole thing is harsh to a lot of people. I don't believe it's been enforced since it was written in 1985. And I think we have the tradition of the city taking care of it because, that's the tradition.
Well, it's
It may have been
political capital. Do you wanna
counter to
expend
this. And as you can tell, there wasn't a consensus of the public property committee about this issue.
To my knowledge, it hasn't been enforced since 1983.
Okay.
Well, the thing too is if I read ordinance 1315, maybe a starting point is to go back and start with that and look at the RCW versus current, where it's at, because
Well, most of what chapter 1212 says is fine. Your original point is, I think, an important one. Does the council have any desire to actually enforce what's in your books? Because most of what's in our municipal code is consistent with state law.
That's an interesting question.
But and state law gives you three choices. You pay for the sidewalk repair from city funds. You ask the property owner, because they're the cause of the defect, if they're the cause of the defect, to pay for the repair, or you make the repair yourself and then lien the property again if you can, if there's some responsibility for the property owner. And all of those, I think, are covered in your current code, all three options here. But it's what do you want Mark's staff to do? I think Mark's asking.
Yeah, well, again, I'm looking at 1315, it doesn't say anything about, it just says defects in sidewalks or public ways caused or contributed to by the roots of trees or smaller growth of vegetation, either located either on private or adjoining property. It's not saying anything about who planted the tree, so to me, that's a distinction we really have to look at.
Do you have any idea for how much, both in terms of labor and cost, your department spends, excuse me, either repairing concrete or pruning shrubs, for example, or trees?
Yeah, we're constantly, we establish a budget in tree removal, and we try to stick to that budget, but it's purely, we're constantly getting calls, and I have to say, hey, you know, that's your tree because it's an open right of way, or now we're having a group of trees, we're having an arborist look at it because we think the trees are fine. So we spend a lot of time on making those determinations on those. On sidewalks for the most, and then cutting back shrubs, you know, we try to keep sidewalks open, and there are certain people in the city that hate the fact that we go and we cut that back. And we've had some pretty long-standing battles with a certain individual where they continue to plant things that go out on the sidewalk, and we go to cut it back, and it's a civil war each time. Sidewalks, we just try to do what we budgeted every year, but we kind of do it on a, once we've been notified that there is an issue, we go fix it. But if we went out and did an actual, if we have the staff and budget to go out and do like a program and do like a sidewalk rehab citywide, and I mean, I couldn't even imagine what that would cost. We are reactive. We react to, you know, somebody complains that the sidewalk's lifted up and they tripped. That's how we make we spend about $25,000 a year on reactive repairs.
How much is it to the property owner if they have to repair a panel? Is it like a couple thousand, do you think?
You know,
Or
it
200,
depends
or-
on a lot of conditions. I mean, if a tree lifted it up and there's a big root, now you're having to have the tree ground out and removed, and then you're.
Put up by hand.
Well, no, just replacing a panel for whatever reason. Maybe it's cracked, or maybe it went up.
If it's cracked and settled, by the time you get a contractor in and remove the concrete, haul it away, you know, probably $1,000. But we typically don't see where one panel is bad. Typically, it's.
No, but I'm thinking for the property owner. If we're telling them this is your responsibility, you have to go and do that, we should at least give them a ballpark.
Get like $1,000 to $2,000. No, we would send them a letter and say, you know, you need to fix it. And then if they didn't, then we'd go and fix it, and we'd just.
But
send them the
we
bill.
would know that we're essentially sending them a $1,000 to $2,000 bill.
Right. That's
Unless we didn't bill them at a discounted, I don't know.
The other thing your code says right now, and as long as we're talking about chapter 1212, that if you want to change, if we're going to change anything about chapter 1212, I'd like to know if you still want appeals to go to the city council. So property owner gets a letter from code enforcement, says you have to repair this sidewalk for these reasons. Your code says if the property owner wants to appeal that letter, it comes to the city council. As you know, many of
It's a good idea.
quasi-judicial things go to your
That's
hearings.
why we get the big
So,
bucks.
Just
to
one.
Top of the planning commission.
What's wrong with our municipal court judge?
Oh, you wanted to go to court.
Well, I mean,
I thought maybe you were
If
talking
you
about.
want politics involved, then bring it here.
Well, no, it wouldn't, no, this is before, they've got the letter, but the time period for them to fix it hasn't expired. They're not in violation, but just the notice itself, you have a problem that you need to pay for.
Can't we have
They
the
get to,
city judge do that?
not the city judge, I would suggest the hearing examiner.
The hearing examiner is like $2,500.
Yeah, that's expensive.
Expensive.
There.
The
Right.
council might be.
Judge is cheaper.
It sounds like city council's gonna continue to hear all of the appeals.
We can have it the public property committee. Seems appropriate.
Still have to kick it to the council.
Yeah.
No, not if we designate them. We delegate.
See, one thing
It
I,
hasn't been much of a problem so far, but.
Well, it will be if we start enforcing it.
right, and when we start to enforce something like this, it's as though we've never had the code. We're starting over. So we need to think about that and the ramifications, especially in some of the historic areas where we've got a lot of repair, or in areas where sidewalks were never put in. What does that mean? Well, that whole area out by Flower Meadows?
I think that's really the issue here is what do you want your sidewalks to look like?
And how do we get them to that point?
Right, and then start talking about the heavy lifting of what is the partnership between the city and what is the city able and willing to do, and what will we ask our taxpayers and city sidewalk owners to do. My suggestion from the finance department would be it'd have to be some kind of partnership where, you know, everybody works together to address these problems.
And that it's handled over a period of time. You don't
Right,
just start
exactly.
doing that now, because people, it wouldn't be affordable. And, you know, there are some areas that the sidewalks are in such terrible condition, and since they've never been asked to do anything about them, I mean, they couldn't begin to think of it. There's some elderly on fixed incomes that could never approach this, and a lien on their house. How scary would that be? So a sensible solution that's carried out over a period of time, I think we have to be working on this.
Well,
But
again,
I'm in favor of just doing what we're doing.
well, we've been
Got a
reactive.
budget, leave it alone.
Yeah, it's been reactive, and we can continue to be reactive. The only difference is instead of us going out and fixing it, we can, you know, go through the code. I wouldn't use this as an excuse to go and fix all the sidewalks.
Well, and you know, I'm
You'd
not
have
saying that.
pitchforks and, you know,
Right.
clubs at the city hall's gates.
But, I mean, we do have to think about it, yes. And I think it's expensive. The city can't probably keep this up, especially as we grow and have that many more sidewalks to maintain. But it's something we need to start working on and bring in over a period of time.
I mean,
just
for
think-
example, we just did some repairs up at Mile Hill in front of the old Taco Time and the movie theater. It's a commercial, so it isn't always just like a residential home. It's that commercial business needed to take care of that. But, you know, there were enough complaints on that section that we just went in and did it. So,
Right, and I told you in one of the meetings in Wisconsin, the property owners know that from the get-go, that the curb and sidewalk is what they're responsible for. So that's something everyone considers when they purchase a home, is what condition that's all
I
in.
was just thinking of that. I don't know how many homeowners have purchased a home knowing that cracked sidewalk is now their liability.
Which is why I'm saying this would have to come in over a period of time. And, you know, maybe it would change when there's a homeowner change. I don't know. But we're going to have to start addressing
Eventually, they
that.
did get their escrow insurance policy that is the sidewalk repair isn't on there. Bet you anything.
I'll see it.
Title insurance?
Yeah, your insurance.
I'd even heard of an incident, I mean, I can't remember where I heard it, but if you have a sidewalk that has snow on it and you didn't touch it and somebody slipped, you would be okay. But if you actually removed the snow and put salt on it and then it froze and they slipped, then you would be
No,
responsible.
that's not true. They're
Okay.
responsible, you're responsible for clearing the snow off your sidewalk. Just, I mean, all these downtown business owners, when you have a snow, you know, a major snowfall, that's their responsibility, to get the snow and ice off the sidewalk.
That's your
For the
alarm
s-
clock.
Yeah, for the same.
Including the people that live along Kitsap Street and
Not those, not Kitsap Street, but every other street.
But what happened
I don't have any
if somebody
sidewalk
slips?
If somebody slips
And this,
on
they're going to
ice,
charge you
did
for
not
it.
put one in, you are potentially liable. Now, you could, probably your homeowner's insurance
Let's
covers
go
it,
on to
but-
something else. I'm bored with this.
Eastern Washington, where I grew up, we went out to shovel the
Yeah.
snow. and when I
Well,
was
plus
in
we paid for it up to
commercial
date.
building, and we went
So it's
out
not
there
like stop it.
constantly shoveling the snow. There, they will come along and tell you.
Yeah,
you
we
shovel
like
it.
this one.
And of course, the minute you get a shovel, the snowplow pushes it back on there.
So
How hard is
consensus,
it to fill or to create an LID?
I was gonna, yeah, I mean, that's an option. The problem with an LID is that, as you will recall, the assessment is based on the incremental increase in value of the property. And it's one thing when you're doing a sewer LID or something major like that. When you're doing a sidewalk, the incremental value is usually pretty small, so it's hard. You're not gonna be able to fund the entire sidewalk repair from property owners, because there just won't be enough value. So the city's gonna have to kick in money to contribute to that, but it could be done.
But you could do a streetscape project you know.
We do the curb gutter,
sidewalk,
sidewalk drainage, and road in
then
one
you could
big.
set up
Right.
something like that, which I think.
But you still need someone to say the increase in assessed value is X and base the assessments on that.
Well, if we were to pick the 2 worst blocks in the city every year and go in and figure out an LID and go up there and say, okay, here's your contribution, and the city will contribute 50% of it, we could get a lot done.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah,
good
I mean-
They could pay it off.
They got a
or
long time
they
to pay it
could-
off,
or they
exactly.
could- Or they could make payment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, LIDs are effective but messy.
And not very popular.
I would be interested, lock you up and say, fix the sidewalk, it's broken.
Yeah, that's,
Well, I know, I was involved in the LID in Old Town Silverdale, and that was like from kind of a public outreach, that was like one of the worst things that I lived through.
But I'd like to see.
I was involved in a ULID to put in a new treatment plant for secondary treatment. That was even worse.
You want to do it once a year?
No.
Okay.
But I think it can be.
John, let's give it to public property.
I think everybody needs to be brought up to a level of understanding.
I agree.
So Mark's instructions are what?
Right, what kind of level of understanding do we have to?
I have none at this.
Let's ignore our laws that we pass. That sounds like fun.
If they do it nationally, I don't see why we can't do it here.
Status quo, it sounds like.
Status quo as we do it and ignore the law. Why don't we change the law and then we could be in compliance?
It's not our law.
Yes, it is.
The
It's our
RCW.
ordinance.
No, it's our ordinance.
Oh, it's your, thought we were going by the RCW.
Municipal code.
We're not even going by our own ordinance.
Doesn't the
That's
RCW
not the
prevail
first time.
to some degree, or?
Well, we're not inconsistent in any major way with,
Unless we, well, if we continue to fix the sidewalks, aren't we?
no.
That's
not
it.
gift-
We'll blame it on the
Isn't that
state.
gifting?
Good.
They said so.
Why don't we set a whole work study and just talk about this?
Well, maybe,
We get a special committee meeting.
you know, isn't it part of a bigger conversation on transportation? You know, I hope that we have that someday. Mark and I and Nick have been talking about some ideas about doing some presentations about possibilities on transportation, where we're at, where we'd like to be, and visioning a little bit.
Well, it's a complete streets conversation, which
Right.
also
So-
includes storm drainage, so.
So if we maintain,
That's a big difference. Like, in my mind, you're talking about, these are the standards to build to. And let's take what we currently have and remodel. 2 different subjects, I think.
maybe.
Yeah,
that's
well,
what-
maybe.
Maybe,
Yeah.
you could be right, but, you know, do we want to, I would,
I appreciate what you're
yeah,
saying.
but you want to repeal this if in fact we are going to look at a large picture. I mean, you can continue on your current path and leave it in your hip pocket and maybe get to a point where you say, we can start a program or, you know, commercial properties or on these properties or whatever, we're gonna, you know, kind of picking up what Cindy was saying, work into this no longer, maybe ADA issues and identify some of those type of issues that we get to. Gosh, you know, we got a lot to do here. And we're
Let's
gonna-
start with the trees that we can definitely say, you planted it, fix it.
Well, that makes sense.
How do you
doesn't it,
prove
Brett?
that they planted it?
That-
Who are you gonna
you know,
hire for
that's-
that?
That's like the most difficult.
Those are the most dangerous ones, aren't they, where the panel gets lifted up?
Well, all, you know,
Consensus on
tree
that.
is like
Anybody
100
walk
years
on the
old.
street on that.
My maple.
What if it's a volunteer that you
Well, then,
I think we should wait until Beck and Rob get back, because I don't want to deprive them of this conversation.
Again, that's probably, it's probably a bigger conversation when we talk about street repairs in general and pavement improvement and sidewalks, all that. I think needs to be attached to that whole conversation.
I guess
Tell
to
me
me
what day
the-
that is, too.
In other
I'll make
words,
sure I'm not
kick
here.
the can.
well, you know, the big thing is, you know, next time we get a complaint, you know, are we gonna go out and add it to our list and we'll go out and assess it and fix it? Or am I gonna, on the public works complaint form, send it to Kathy Wilson and say, please send abatement letter? You know, really, that's,
Yeah, I know. Well, don't you now know, didn't you earlier say that you noticed people, like if their trees were something, and if they don't fix it, you go out and fix it?
We've been doing it as part of our budget.
Okay.
And like cutting back trees and stuff, I mean, we get a complaint from Kitsap Transit or the school district or the fire department, you know, we'll go back and cut that. Based on this though, theoretically, the person should, but we came to that decision if it was a immediate sight distance issue, then we were gonna fix it.
For the most part, these trees are trees that were planted by the city. Isn't that true?
Not
No?
necessarily. I would say the majority of them were planted as part of, like anything in a commercial area is like 99% planted by the development.
Okay.
These older street trees that were planted on Kitsap, I mean, you're talking, what, were they planted in the 60s as some sort of an improvement project? Or I know that Jerry planted hers, but you know, throughout the city. You know, I have no
We
idea.
did a big thing trying to remember when it was, Norm Dix pushed this big thing. There was a big campaign by the feds to put trees in urban areas, and all the trees up and down Sydney, for example, I know the city put in. So there's a lot of them around in this hillside that the city actually put in.
Right, but if you-
Especially those that are between the curb and the walk.
Well, the ones down South Kitsap Boulevard, they were put in as part of that
That was
road
part of the
improvement.
development, yeah.
Trees that were put in during, like if you do like residential developments, like the ones out behind the guy that they just cut them, the one behind Albertsons. You know, that was as a condition, that's actually conditioned by the city for the developer to put in all those street trees. That's typically where most of them get installed, is during that plat development by condition of the city. And then once the city.
That doesn't make them our trees, though.
No, once it's recorded, it's dedicated as right-of-way, and it becomes, again, that adjoining property owner's responsibility. So, you know, there's many ways in which a street.
If we could move
tree
on, I'll
is
pay
planted.
for the sidewalks myself.
Chris, were you raising your hand, Chris?
Oh, I just want, is Port Orchard a Tree City, you know what I mean, Tree City USA? Are you guys designated as such? No.
Probably not.
I think,
Tacoma.
Well,
is it Bremerton?
Tree City is.
I think Tacoma was.
Tacoma.
You know, Chris, I think that was the campaign that Norm was pushing years ago, that we went around and planted a bunch of these trees. Now, whether we reached the level of, we now have enough trees, I don't know. We put in a lot of trees, we got funding to buy the trees and install them for the feds.
What year was that?
Oh golly, I don't remember, I think it was in probably the late 80s.
I went on their website a while back, thinking what they call a neighbor woods program might work here, and I didn't see us listed. I looked.
We have citizens that wanted to contribute.
Where's the microphone? I can't hear.
I know there's no way for me to prove it, but I believe the tree that's lifting the sidewalk the most is because of it trying to compensate the horrible cutting that has been done on it, so that all of the weight is on the sidewalk side, and it's trying to compensate for taking all the branches off the other side.
Well,
Right, and I know that you will argue with me,
I will.
but the other trees on that same deal that aren't as mutilated aren't having that same problem. But that one tree is really, it's lifted the sidewalk, so I'll be one of your first candidates, I can see.
Maybe it's striking out more.
no, basically what we're finding, Jerry, quite honestly, is it's all about species. And I just had a conversation just yesterday with Puget Sound Energy. All those brand-new red maples that are in our current landscape code, that are required as part of the development that were put on Sydney and Sedgwick in front of that brand-new apartment complex, Asplund and PSC contacted me and said, take those trees out of there. When I said, it's in our code and it's allowed, we can't do that, they said, we will pay to replace them. So they're gonna have to do trees. The difference is, they're not gonna do red maples because they know that they have to maintain those transmission lines, and they're gonna be fighting that forever. So it's cheaper for them right now to put in a tree that is more compatible with the street. And that's really happening all over the place. If you look at Bremerton, all those Japanese cherry trees that were down Pacific, they buzzed those off years ago, and they've now ground them out. And any new construction that they've had, like in the waterfront parks and stuff, they've put in the tree boxes. That Tacoma just did that. They're using trees that don't grow with big roots out. They do a tap root down. They keep them in tree boxes so that they don't lift the sidewalks. So we've gotten better, I think, from a perspective of choosing the right tree to go in the street. But the problem is you've got 50, 60 years of, you know, planting trees that everybody loves down these little nice treed neighborhoods that are just, you know, lifting the sidewalks. My ex-stepson lived in Magnolia, and you look at that whole neighborhood, it's beautiful in the spring. But you can't, it's like a roller coaster walking down the sidewalk, you know.
And yet we are, put this on our agenda, you know. It's a,
So, anyway, so it's, yeah, it's, you know, I could just keep going along status quo and saying, you know,
Amen.
if it's an issue, we'll fix it. We could talk about it during budget. I don't know.
perhaps talk about it.
Something we need to look at going into the future. But, you know, another thing is, where do people like to live? Those beautiful, magnificent trees are. North Stadium District in Tacoma, it is gorgeous. Would I want to live there with that big tree in the front yard, even with the raised up sidewalk? Uh-huh. So, I know we were at war. But
Engineers just don't like trees in the street because they put leaves in the catch basins and lift up the sidewalks and.
Lift up the roads, drive on Shrew Street.
Well, they get
between
into-
Tacoma and West.
The roots get into the sewer systems and clog
and they're
pipes.
so beautiful, and there's shade, and it's habitat, and.
I
How
know.
about that?
Well,
I
I'd
know
just
you're
like to
talking-
make a quick update. I was telling Chris Henry that according to arbor.org, the other 3 cities in Kitsap are tree cities. That's Bainbridge, Bremerton, and Hallsville. Port Orchard is not a tree city.
Let's mow them down.
You do
No,
like
that
that.
means we can do anything we want with them.
Anyway, so am I hearing that we're gonna talk about it later? In the meantime, I'll just go status quo.
We'll talk about it later. Item
Jerry's
number-
like,
Item number 5,
Talk
sidewalk.
about an Arbor Day. Oh, shoot.
Cliff Randerson, would you tell us about item number 5?
I've got a second sidewalk.
It's not done.
Oh, no, we can I'll let,
Well, I'll just start it off and then Mark can chime in. So I know that we talked about at the last meeting, and I don't have my staff report. We talked about it at the May 27th council meeting when the Bay Street Bistro wanted to put have a sidewalk cafe, basically. It's my understanding from the meeting that the council was supportive of it, they encouraged it, they loved it. In fact, that they didn't want to charge a fee because they're an established business, they pay taxes, and so we sent the applicant a letter letting them know that it's good to go. We received another application for Cafe Gabrielle. They want to put cafe out there. However, Mark has contacted the Washington State Department of Transportation, and they are against it. So, and then that's Mark.
well, okay, this is kind of my fault. If you remember, when this came up, because I do try to do my due diligence and make sure that I don't, if I know something from my history is amiss in my mind, I at least try to follow up. So I know something about airspace leases, and so when this conversation first came up, I did try to get a hold of somebody that I used to know at DOT, just to kind of say, hey, you know, I know that the right-of-way in the downtown is from the building face to the building face. And so is this an issue? So I just left a message because I didn't talk to this person. And that's why that night when we had that conversation, remember, I advised, I said, look, you probably shouldn't charge any money so that there's no, even if it's $10. And that was my advice at the time. Basically, I misspoke in that when this other person called me back, who I didn't have a relationship with, just basically said, state right away, you can't use the right away unless you have a lease with the state. End of. And so that, I'm like, whoa, that was pretty harsh. So that's kind of where it's at. Now, I haven't heard back from this person.
And don't call them again, please.
I'm not.
Okay.
But the reality of it is I think, again, we need
Better
to
to
know.
find out now than a year from now when they owe a whole bunch of back
I
money.
think it's just,
The issue is that anytime you use the state right-of-way, I mean, look at the air cargo building, that lower parking lot. They had to work out a lease to use that parking lot. There are a number of, any state highway that runs through cities, whether it's for landscaping, signage, anything like that, the State Department of Transportation manages the right-of-way for the people of the state, just like the DNR manages the mud in the aquatic lands lease. There's no difference. And so they take it very seriously that if somebody's using their right-of-way and gaining income off of that right-of-way, and the money isn't being leased and sent back to the state, then it's a gifting. So this woman was extremely adamant that if they're going to use those sidewalks, they need to have a lease with the Department of Transportation, and they have established fees, and it really doesn't involve the city other than we can have our own permit like Paulsville recently did that said we'll manage making sure that there's conditions that say you need to keep the sidewalk clear and stuff like that. But as far as like the use of it, it's
And Mark, this only applies to Bay Street because it's a
State
state
highway,
right-of-way. It's just-
right.
I just want to be clear, this is not blanket all over the
well,
city.
or Bethel as you go up,
Right, okay,
166.
Yeah.
Right.
So the restaurants that want to do this are going to actually have to work with the state and sign a lease with the state. And our only involvement then is going to make sure they have the 36-inch space between any obstruction.
36 or 48 or whatever it is.
Whatever, yeah.
Basically, and at this point, I have no idea if the DOT is going to now drive through here and, you know, expend resources to come up and say, hey, do you have a lease for those tables? I don't know.
So we have no one to refer them to.
Well, I could. The question is, do we want to do that, or do we just want to say it's a mulligan and?
You know, we're acting as if it's an adversarial relationship with the state, and I don't think we should
Sounds
assume
like it.
that. I think we should tell them that we, the council, want to do this with a sidewalk that's in our jurisdiction, and we would like them to work it out.
Yeah, that's, I guess, what I'm saying, is do you want me
Do you
to?
need us to write a letter or a resolution telling them, the state, that this is what the council would like to do?
No, all we need to do is Brandy would simply modify that application form that says, this is the application form, you need to keep the sidewalk clear, and oh, by the way, you need to contact, you know, so-and-so at the Department of Transportation and get an airspace lease.
And then whether they do or not is between them and WashDOT. But we've at least told them what the right steps are.
So we can issue a permit of approval on our end, and then it's up to them to go and deal with whatever lease, and if they do or if they don't, and if they don't, they
Tell the
will
state
the
to put a
state on
stop
that. Pay or
If
whatever.
the state ever pursued it, yes. I'm okay with that.
That makes sense.
We're notifying them of what we know.
So you're assuming that
What
what
we
the
found
state's
out.
gonna ask for that property is gonna be reasonable.
They have they have set fees for use of right-of-ways, like they already have a fee schedule for something like that.
Do we have a clue what that is? Do we know what that is, that fee schedule?
We have to pay here that I'm gonna drive through every city in America,
It was,
turn them in.
I think we were, what, $10 a month? I think the state was $90 a month.
We
So-
just finished, as a transit industry in the state of Washington, about a year and a half long debate with the Department of Transportation over air right leases for our bus stops along state highways.
How'd that turn out?
We don't
Costly.
have to pay anything, but we still have to get a permit.
Was that because of the double-decker buses, or?
No, that's a bus stop.
It's along the state highway.
If it's on state highway, it's on state right of way.
Now, there is an option that the city could pursue if they chose, if you wanted to purchase the sidewalk, I think the state would be amenable to that. So from the curb to the building, you could, but they can't just vacate, you would actually have to pay appraised value, then the sidewalk would be yours, and then you could issue your own permit.
State's supposed to maintain those sidewalks?
No, they only maintain, so under
They're buying
RCW,
property.
So they wanna rent them, but they don't wanna pay for them.
well, under RCW 4724, there's, until we get to 25,000 in population, there are predetermined they're established who does what. And so for the city of Port Orchard, we do, snow and ice, vegetation. The state is responsible for the road from curb to curb. So even under the RCW, the city still maintains the sidewalks, but then we maintain the sidewalks, which means we go to our 12.12 for the adjoining property owner. I'm just saying that if we were to have the state vacate that, then there would be no reason for anybody to get an airspace lease.
Well, couldn't council just request that the mayor send a letter to the state to waive the fees for the right-of-way lease?
I would, they won't do that.
Yeah, so then they'd have to do it for every city?
It'd be easier for Brandy just to put it on the application, and it's up to them to get the airspace
It's
lease.
easier just not to call them again.
But isn't it an economic decision by
yes.
the vendor or the purveyor of the establishment to determine whether or not it's in their best interest financially if this lease makes sense on their return on investment? And, that's really a private business decision. The city can facilitate a permit that says the city is not opposed to this. But if the state owns this right away and the state legislature said we want a return on our public investment, then it's between the entrepreneur and the owner of the property, which happens to be the state.
I agree. I think we know something, and I think
Everybody thinks
we
that's,
have to let them know.
Yeah.
And for our part, we're supportive, we're not gonna charge you $10. All we care about is maintaining the needed distance space. We'll wish you the best of luck.
But we're not gonna-
It's their sidewalk.
it's not our job to police the state's right away.
Right.
Well, that's
I
a
mean,
good,
that-
that's a good question, Mr. Mayor, because is it our job to turn all these people in?
No, I don't think
All
so.
we need to do
We're
is
not-
tell them
we're
we're
not
supposed
trying
to
to
deal with the
We're
state.
just gonna tell them that it's the state right away and they need to check with the state if they
And
do
that's the
so.
last you'll hear of it from us.
Yeah.
And what are they-
I'm for that.
Right, that's what we're saying.
Yeah. Are we? Okay. Good.
We're
Number
discussing.
6.
You agree?
I concur.
Number 6, council retreat date and agenda. Clerk Reiner.
No, not so much. So I provided in, more than half of you got it on the dais at last council meeting, and then I think a couple of you got a copy of it in your inbox. And it's just a poll of the city council retreat, and I kind of picked some Fridays and Saturdays that I thought would be doable. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get 100% attendance of 7 council members and the mayor in the next 3 weeks. So, to hold a retreat. And I haven't approached department directors if they're what their schedule is, but, so I guess I'm asking, is there some other dates that you guys want to hold this retreat? Do we want to push it out to the end of July to see if there's a date? I'm just not quite sure. Did everybody bring their calendars?
Not everybody's here.
Yeah, and that's the other issue, so. I could do another doodle poll, I can throw someone,
What are we talking about on the retreat? What are we talking about on the retreat?
and then that's the second part of it.
Well, I guess the question I have is I thought it was requested that staff be there, but we're not on the doodle poll. And, I'd rather not do it on a Saturday.
Didn't have it on the agenda. It's not a bad idea, but that wasn't on the agenda, I don't think.
Yeah, honestly, the staff has got so much on their plate. And the directors don't get paid for Saturdays, and that's their only chance to take care of their private business. I'd prefer it to be on a weekday when they can, if it's mandatory attendance, at least they're on here anyway. So, I would be speaking against having a Saturday.
I don't want it on Saturday either.
Spoken by a true retiree.
Every day is Saturday. He doesn't want it at all.
I prefer on Saturday, if we're all trying to get in on Saturdays.
You do want it on Saturday? Oh, yeah.
It's useful for family.
I want to stay married, and I have enough morning and
You're
evening
not
meetings.
married to your job? Come on.
I am married to my job, but I also want to stay married to my wife.
Well, I think, Randy, you should extend it to July. And, you know, I could take a Friday as a holiday if I'm the only holdout. I'm actually more concerned about the agenda because I don't think we have decided what we want to talk about. I don't think we've asked all the staff to be there. I don't think we have anything on the agenda. I'd like to add an item on communication, but I don't think I have heard any other agenda items. Do we want visioning?
Do
You
we
know,
have agenda
It
items?
could be, generally it's sort of the
The
visioning.
last,
we go through
the last
priorities.
couple of years, you have
Yeah.
focused
On goals.
a lot of your time on council goals, recapping what you've accomplished and forecasting what you want to focus on. That doesn't mean you have to do it your next retreat that way. But that is how you've done the last several.
And knowing what you might talk about, you can make the decision on whether or not you want staff there. If you're gonna talk about updates on previous goals and then what you want as future goals, I think staff needs to be there if you're gonna have that
I'm
conversation.
pretty sure we're gonna be talking about sidewalks.
It sounds like death by 1,000 conflicts.
No, we can't make the sidewalks. We won't be able to make
So we have to wait for Robin Beck, is that what the,
Or she could do another doodle poll.
Well, we can't do it this Friday. So, or on the 13th or 14th. So.
So I can do doodle polls, and I can do different times. So I can do the 9 to 11, I can do 4 to 8. I mean, you just have to give me some days and times that you want me to do that, and I'll carry it out for a couple weeks. So do you just only want Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays in the mornings? And I can carry it out to the end of July, or do you only want Fridays in the morning? Is there a consensus on that part? Or do you want me just to pick some dates?
You can put them out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we'll just see who,
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday mornings.
let people's calendars mandate which day we're gonna go.
I thought the 9 to 1 timeframe worked well in general, at least for me.
Okay.
Pardon me?
Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday, 9 to 1.
Worked well for me. I don't know if anybody else has to chime
How long do these usually last?
in.
3 to 4 hours.
3 to 4 hours?
Without trees.
we have Rotary on Tuesdays at noon.
Depends on whether or not we have donuts and lunch.
Okay, I'm in.
Okay. Agenda suggestions?
Is there any topics? I mean, I could put your goals and goals on there. I can put, Councilmember Chang wanted communication on there. Is any other items?
Do you want us to email?
Think
you
about
items
it.
as
Yeah, why
come
don't
up?
we email?
Yeah, if you guys can send me some topics that you want and maybe some research information of what you're looking for.
Can we go on the agenda? Because I may not want to talk about communications, and if I'm
I
gonna
mean,
spend 4
I wanna
hours.
talk about sidewalks.
Well, see, you might not want to talk about sidewalks, so we should vote on it.
Okay.
Well, I'll send a draft of the big wish list and then we can weed them down from there. How's that before we meet? Okay,
All right.
What do you
Or you
mean by
could put them on another doodle poll.
communication?
that I could do.
Okay. Anything for the good of the order? Anybody have additional comments? Seeing none, we stand